Hi, I'm Karissa Muñoz, the Senior Scientific Communications Manager here at Immunits. And today I am very, very fortunate to be speaking with Dr. David Fajgenbaum. He's a physician and researcher at UPenn who is best known for his work on Castleman disease, a condition he has battled personally. And he's co-founded and is the executive director of the Castleman Disease Collaborative Network, or CDCN, an organization that is dedicated to accelerating research and treatment for Castleman disease. Now, Dr. Fajgenbaum, your journey and your perseverance to improve your health is nothing short of inspirational, and we wanted to highlight you and discuss your work on Castleman disease, your personal journey with finding a cure, and basically your perspective on how the medical field should be approaching immunotherapeutic development. So first of all, how do you describe yourself, or what do you call yourself when you introduce yourself to people?
Well, Karissa, thanks so much for having me on. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to chat with you about all these shared interests that we have. So when I talk about the work that I do, I guess you could put myself into a few buckets. One is as an immunologist. So I study the immune system, particularly in hyperinflammatory disease states when the immune system is out of control. But I also can consider myself to be a drug repurposer. And so we might need to come up with a more flashy name, but basically it's around this concept of understanding what's going on in a given disease and then asking the question, what drugs are already FDA approved for something else that maybe we could use to address the condition at hand?
I wanted to know if you can briefly share with us, for those of us who don't know already, your personal journey with Castleman disease and
Sure.
how has it shaped your approach to medicine?
Absolutely. So I was a healthy medical student here at the University of Pennsylvania. I wanted to be an oncologist in memory of my mom who had passed away just a few years before, when I went from being totally healthy to being critically ill. All of my organs shut down, liver, kidneys, bone marrow, my heart, my lungs, all shut down. My doctors told me I wouldn't survive, so a priest read me my last rites, said goodbye to my family, and never thought that I'd be able to survive due to this horrible disease, idiopathic multi-centric Castleman disease, where basically your immune system attacks your vital organs for an unknown cause. And I ended up receiving a lot of chemotherapy to try to get my disease into remission, but I kept relapsing. And I eventually went on a journey to try to identify a drug that I thought maybe could treat my disease, and began testing it on myself. And thankfully have been doing well for over 9.5 years on this medication. And for me, that really opened up this incredible hidden secret. And that is that the drugs that sit in our pharmacies oftentimes can have more uses than their initial indication, and that there are many diseases that could benefit from cures that are literally sitting on the pharmacy shelf. And so that's just sort of lit me on fire to try to figure out, how do we save as many people's lives as we can with the tools that are within reach.
That's fantastic. And can you describe a little bit more about your work with repurposing already FDA-approved drugs?
Sure. So we think about it in a few different ways. So one is where we work in the laboratory to understand what's happening on a molecular level in a hyperinflammatory disease like Castleman's, like COVID, like sepsis. Basically, what's occurring, what's the serum proteome, what's the transcriptome, what is a signature that you can get from what's happening in the patient. And then you can ask the question, if there is a signature that a particular communication line called mTOR is too active, then you can say, well, is there an mTOR inhibitor that could maybe reduce this signature that we're seeing in the blood or the tissue? And that's what we did in my case. We got the signal that sirolimus might be useful because there's a strong mTOR signature, and sirolimus is an mTOR inhibitor. And so that's what we do often in my lab in my center here at Penn, and we've been very successful. A total of 17 times now, including the drug that I'm on. We've identified and/or advanced a drug that wasn't intended for that disease for a use that's helping patients. And so that's the main way that we do drug repurposing, or that we've been doing it up until about a year ago. And a year ago, we launched this really cool, exciting new organization called EveryCure, where we said, okay, we know that there's all these drugs out there that could help patients. We know that there's patients who are suffering while the treatments are sitting there. And we know in many cases there's data that already links those drugs to the diseases that those patients have. So what if we could create a really systematic approach to using the world's knowledge to connect drugs and diseases at scale? And so, of course, this coincides very well with really the advent of these large language models utilizing artificial intelligence and other AI approaches to match these drugs and diseases at scale. And so through Every Cure, we are endeavoring, and we've actually already come up with a V1 of it, to come up with a single score for the likelihood of every single drug to treat every single disease, all 3,000 drugs against all 20,000 human diseases. And you can use that ranking system to then say, okay, these are the top 5 opportunities for using drugs against diseases. Let's go do clinical trials. Let's prove that they actually work in patients, and let's just go out and change clinical practice.
That's excellent. And so what are some of the challenges in research and development for rare diseases?
Goodness, there are so many. At the top of the challenge list is that rare diseases are rare, therefore it's hard to get your hands on enough samples, enough data, and also it's hard to garner interest, whether it's federal funding or interest from companies because the disease is rare. And so hard to do the research, hard to fund it because of the rareness. I think it also is challenging because so many rare diseases are so devastating, and they're so horrible for children and also people throughout the lifespan. But they're the diseases that are the most neglected, that are oftentimes the most severe. And so it feels like in our society we should figure out a way to fix that, right? The things that are ailing us and causing the most morbidity, I think should be the ones where we put the most attention to. But unfortunately, it's the opposite. And a lot of these diseases, we call them orphan diseases because they're both rare and they're also often neglected.
Did this motivate you to create the Castleman Disease Collaborative Network?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a third-year med student when I first got sick with Castleman's, and as a medical student, you kind of have this false belief that like there's treatments for everything and that everyone works together collaboratively. Because like in medical school, they don't give you exam questions where it's like we don't know the answer. It's not like what treats this? Oh, no one knows. Or how does this disease work? Oh, no one knows. That's not like one of your multiple choice answers. So you get tested on things that we know. And so you get this false sense that like the medical community knows everything about everything. But the reality is that we know like everything about things we know, and we know nothing about things we don't know, right? And so it was very shocking for me to go from being this medical student at a great institution like UPenn to realizing that, oh my gosh, there are thousands of diseases with no treatments. And even worse, many of those diseases, we don't know anything about how they work. And for others, we know how they work, and there's a treatment that likely would work, but no one's done the work to match them together. So yes, that very much motivated me and inspired me to say, this is what I want to spend my life doing, is matching drugs and diseases and making sure that patients, that are suffering right now could benefit as rapidly as possible.
To pivot a little bit, how is your understanding of the immune system's role in Castleman disease influence like your thoughts on immune decline related to age and other diseases?
Well, I'm sure your viewers have heard the term rapamycin a lot over the years, but they probably, or they may not realize that the drug I mentioned earlier, sirolimus, that's saving my life, is rapamycin. Sirolimus is what we call that compound when it's in a human. Rapamycin is typically what we call that compound when we give it to non-human organisms. But for whatever reason, rapamycin is sort of the term that is stuck in the anti-aging community as opposed to sirolimus. But it's the exact same compound. And so the drug that is extending my life by over 9 years is rapamycin. We often talk about life extension with rapamycin and with a lot of these drugs, but yeah, literally, rapamycin has given me 9 years of life that I never could have imagined. But in addition to that really obvious linkage, which is that mTOR inhibition or mTOR activation was really through the roof in my disease, so I thought an mTOR inhibitor like sirolimus or rapamycin could be effective. To your point, there are a number of other aspects of inflammation that play really important roles as we age. And so there are a number of drugs, JAK inhibitors, TNF inhibitors, IL-6 blockers, IL-1 blockers, that we utilize often in the world that I'm in, that there's a lot of reason to be hopeful that those same sorts of agents, maybe at the right dose, modulating in the right way, could be really, really helpful for aging.
On the topic of aging, so when you were at the Clinton Global Initiative, I remember you had said that 1 in 10 people will develop a disease that doesn't have a treatment. And It's well known that aging isn't recognized as a disease by the FDA currently, but we know that age-related immune decline is a major contributor to a variety of diseases. And one of the main purposes of Immunis is to create human cell-derived secretomes to combat age and immune-related decline in a variety of diseases. But I wanted to know, do you think aging is a disease? And if so, is it something we can cure?
It's a great question. And yeah, if we do classify aging as a disease, then that 1 in 10 becomes, 10 in 10, because all of us, those of us that are lucky enough to age, we age. So yeah, I think that it's a really, it's a great question. I think that how we define disease, I think is a bit problematic. I have a disease called Castleman's where 1/3 of us with my disease have a particular subtype, and 1/3 of that 1/3 respond to one therapy, and the other 2/3 of the 1/3 respond to other therapies. And we separate the disease up the way we do based on sort of clinico-pathological features, but the fact that that blocking and addressing one part of the mechanism doesn't work across patients just highlights that I think that we're pretty rudimentary when it comes to like what we call diseases. Now, if and when medications are uncovered that do extend the lifespan the way that rapamycin appears that it may be able to, in the way that a number of other these secreted factors that it sounds like your company would be hot on the trail of, I think that's when you do get in the space of being able to talk about aging as a disease. Is if there's a clear way to sort of modulate aging and length of life, then that suggests that it's not just this inevitable future that we all will have. Now, curing aging, I think, is a harder thing for me to wrap my head around. But I think that endeavoring for that sort of world, I love it. I mean, I love the audacious statement of it. I mean, I run an organization called Every Cure. I don't think you can get more audacious than talking about every cure, but maybe curing aging would be the only thing that might be more audacious than that. But I love that sort of a vision. I love that North Star, and let's shoot for the stars.
That's beautiful. And to kind of highlight what you mentioned previously about one of the challenges being like the complexity of our biology, we know that at Dr. Daniel Kraft's next Med Health conference, you had said that the challenge with curing yourself was taking into consideration the variability in like your cells, the cellular networks, and the different cytokines. So I just wanted to know, based on your expertise, do you think that we should be looking at immune-related diseases with multiple target, multiple shots on goal approach, where we're using something as complex as maybe like a secretome to address a disease rather than one drug, one target?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that, diseases are so much more complicated than we all would like to think. It'd be nice if some of these frameworks that are on my window were perfectly accurate. But the reality is that we have to try to reduce down complicated things down to, very clear frameworks and pathways. And that's just the only way we can wrap our heads around things. But to your point, I think it's a lot more complicated than that. So yeah, I think that multiple modalities, we're huge fans of serum proteomics. And we do a lot of single-cell RNA sequencing and certainly flow cytometry. I think looking at things from multiple angles and then seeing if you see the same thing, I think is always a really good thing.
And to kind of touch a little bit more on your experience with trying to help others with Castleman disease, I know you've mentioned that you take a very patient-centric approach, and sometimes a treatment doesn't work for two different people that are diagnosed with the same disease. So I just wanted to know, how do you approach that, or how do you like reconcile those differences as a medical doctor?
It's really tough. We have been able to uncover a few biomarkers, so blood tests you can run before you give someone a drug that will help you to predict whether a drug will work better than another drug. Those sorts of predictive biomarkers are really helpful, especially for a disease like Castleman's, where time is of the essence. You don't have weeks and months to see if something's going to work or not going to work. And so I think that's one way to get around it, is to understand you still don't know why one drug works better than another, but at least you have a marker to suggest that one drug will be better than another drug. That, I think, is a step in the right direction. Of course, the further you dig down that direction, you'll eventually be able to uncover why. We're just not quite there yet.
And can you touch a little bit on your experience with your clinical trials for for treating Castleman disease?
Sure. I'm a huge proponent of evaluating things in rigorous clinical trials. I think that we need to do the biological work to understand whether something is likely to work, but then we should also take a very unbiased step back and say, let's prove it. If we really believe it, let's prove it. Let's do the right clinical trial, set it up in the right way, and let's really prove the thing that we believe. I think many of us, myself included in the repurposing space, we want drugs to work so badly because we just want to help people so badly that it's possible that sometimes there's drugs that we're thinking to repurpose that maybe have no to little benefit just because, we want to help people so badly. And I think that the best thing we can do to help people is to come up with those hypotheses, but then to rigorously evaluate them in clinical trials. And then you really know, does it work or not?
And how do you see the future of immunotherapy evolving, or has it changed much in the past 10 years?
Oh my gosh, yeah, the last 10 years, it's been incredible to see what's changed with immunotherapy. To think that it was about 10 years ago that the first patient was ever treated with cellular immunotherapy for cancer, where you basically reprogram a certain type of immune cell called a T cell to kill your cancer. And that also sort of woke us up to the concept that when you start tinkering and engineering your own immune cells, bad things can happen. And so cytokine storms can occur, so you have to control the cytokine storm. But it's amazing. In the last 10 years, we've also seen diseases like heart disease being able to be controlled with anti-inflammatory medications. So, we've seen that IL-1 blockade reduces heart attacks. We've seen that colchicine, an old gout drug, also reduces heart attacks and strokes. So it's just sort of changing our whole mindset around diseases. We used to think about heart disease as not being an inflammatory disease at all, and now we know that something like heart disease is inflammatory. And so I think that we're learning more and more that the immune system is playing such an important role across so many diseases. And I think that maybe the last 10 years has been like the great awakening to that concept, and also the beginning of the ability to modulate. But hopefully the next 10 years are really about matching the right agent to the right problem, so that way we really can turn these switches on and off in the right way.
That's excellent. And us as a small biotech, we're currently in phase 1/2A clinical trials by testing one secretome therapy. Do you have any advice for any other companies like ours that are in the early clinical trial stage for an uncurable disease like aging or like muscle atrophy?
Yeah, I think, the first thing I would say is just thank you for the work that you guys do. It's so difficult, to start from the very beginning and to think about the timelines and the costs and all that stuff. But, one step at a time. I've been through some challenges in my life, so I can appreciate the challenges of drug development. And a couple ways that I've sort of gotten through some really low points. One, and I'm thinking back to time when I was in ICU. So step one for me has been look to your future. What is the thing that you're dreaming of? So in your case, it's that FDA approval where you're actually able to address some of the challenges associated with aging. So one, look to your future. Two, look beside you. Who's next to you? Make sure that you've got great friends and colleagues and teammates that are rowing in the same direction, that are there to support you, and that as you're having a hard time, you're leaning on them, you're getting strength from them. And the third is to look at your feet and take one step at a time and recognize that you're not going to get that far vision away tomorrow. And even with the best supporters by your side, it's still got to be one step at a time. So with the right vision in front of you, the right people by your side, and then really one step at a time, I think that you guys are going to get there.
Appreciate that so much. And I wanted to know too, what do you want people to remember most about your work and what you do?
I think the few things that come to mind first, it's that cures are literally sitting on the pharmacy shelf. Drugs that are approved for one thing have incredible potential in other disease areas. I'll just share a couple examples to bring it to life. The drug thalidomide was a horrible drug that was causing all these birth defects before researchers discovered that it was an effective treatment for leprosy, and shortly thereafter an effective treatment for a horrible cancer called multiple myeloma. And when you think about leprosy and myeloma, you would never connect them. But again, it's because many diseases share the same underlying mechanisms, even if they appear visibly or externally very different. Examples like Viagra, of course, it's well-known use, but it also is very effective for a rare pediatric lung disease. And so again, one would maybe not make those connections. And these sorts of things happen while drugs are on patent. Connections are made, drugs are commercialized, but 80% of all FDA-approved drugs are generic. So they're off patent. There's no money to be made from finding a new use for them. So 80% of these amazing opportunities, no one's looking for them, and these serendipitous connections aren't being made. And so I think the main thing I'd share is that with the audience is just that we have hope, and we have reason to be hopeful. For a lot of diseases out there, they could benefit from existing drugs. We just need to do the work to find them. And the second thing is really around my personal journey, and that's just I've learned a lot from my journey. I wrote a book about it called Chasing My Cure, and probably the biggest takeaway from Chasing My Cure, and that I take away from it, is this concept of turning hope into action. And that's that all of us hope for things, we pray for things, we wish for things, we hope that someone we care about does well against a disease. We hope for some outcome. But for me, my life really started changing when I started saying, what am I hoping for? Or what kind of action can I take to get closer to that thing I'm hoping for? And obviously, you and your colleagues, Karissa, are really turning your hope into action. You're hoping for these incredible breakthroughs in medicine, and you're turning that into action. You're driving forward your company. But I hope for everyone listening that reflect on, what are you hoping for? What are you wishing for? What are you praying for? And then ask, okay, what can I do tomorrow to get closer to the thing that I'm hoping for?
Well, David, you've gone through all of our questions, and I wanted to just say you are very articulate, you are very kind, you persevere, and a lot of us can learn from your story. And we thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing, that you continue to do, and you inspire people like myself who are just starting off in our career. And I cannot wait for everyone to hear about your perspectives. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Such a pleasure to hear more about your company and to share more about our vision. And I'm just so thankful for great people like you doing important work. And with all of us rowing in the same direction, we're going to make a lot of difference together.